Janice's idea of a low-sodium diet for him is to get these frozen dinners in plastic pouches called low-cal. Most of this pre-cooked chicken and beef is full of chemicals, so it doesn't go bad on the shelf. To work it all through his system, he usually has a second beer. Janice is distracted these days, full of excitement about taking these real estate courses at the Penn State Extension. "Honey, why do you need to do this?" Harry asks. "You have the lot." "I don't have the lot. Nelson has the lot." "Does he? I dropped over there today and he wasn't there, just these kids he's hired. One fag, one wop, and a skirt." "Harry, now who's sounding prejudiced?" He doesn't push ahead with his story. He wants to save it for when they both can focus. After dinner, Janice likes to watch Jeopardy, even though she never knows any of the answers, and then the Phillies are playing the Mets on Channel 11. The little stone house on Franklin Drive draws darkling about them, just them, in the evening as the gradual northern dusk seeps into the still bare trees. In the third inning, with 2 men on, Schmidt hits a home run, his 4th of the season and the 546th of his career. And Harry begins. "There's something going wrong over at the lot. When I was over there today, I asked to see the books, and this fag with AIDS Nelson has put in as bookkeeper instead of Mildred told me he couldn't show them to me unless you authorized it. You're the boss, according to him." The tip of Janice's little tongue creeps out and presses on her upper lip. "That was silly," she says. "I have a new theory," Harry says. "I think Nelson is taking drugs, and that's why he's so shifty and jumpy." "Who told you this?" He squirms on the bed. "Nobody told me," he says. "I just put 2 and 2 together. Cocaine's everywhere, and these yuppie baby boomers Nelson's age are just the ones who use it. It takes money, lots of money, to maintain a real habit. Doesn't Prue keep complaining about all these bills they can't pay?" Janice says carefully, "Most young couples have bills they can't pay." He sits up. "The worst of it is, I think he's been bleeding the company. I think he's been stealing and Lyle has been helping him. That's why they let Mildred go." "What evidence do you have?" Janice asks. This irritates him. "That's what I was saying. I asked to look at the accounts and bank statements today and they wouldn't let me unless you authorized it. This may be something we have to bring the cops in on eventually." "Harry," Janice says, "your own son." "Well," he says, irritated again, "his own mother. Stealing from his own mother." "It's only your theory," she says. "You don't know what the real story is. It's all just your suspicions." "I don't know what the real story is, but you do, huh? What has Nelson told you?" She pinches her mouth shut, so she seems to have no lips at all. "Nothing really," she lies. "Nothing really? Well, okay then. You know more than I do. Good luck. It's you he's ripping off. It's your father's company he and his queer buddies are taking down the tube." "Nelson wouldn't steal from the company." "Honey, you don't understand the power of drugs," Harry says. "Read the papers. Just the other day they pulled Yogi Berra's kid in. People who are into coke will kill their grandmother for a fix. It used to be heroin was the bottom of the barrel, but crack makes heroin look mild." "Nelson doesn't do crack. Much," Janice says. "Oh? Who says?" She almost tells him, but gets frightened. "Nobody. I just know my own son, and from what Prue lets drop." "Prue talks, does she? What does she say?" "She's miserable, and the children too. If it weren't for the children," Prue confessed to me, "she would have left Nelson long ago." Harry feels evaded. "Let's keep to the subject. You better get your man-child out of Springer Motors fast." "I'll talk to him, Harry. I don't want you to say a word. You'll come on too strong." "But not you," Harry says. "He's sure of me. He knows I love him." "And I don't?" "You do, Harry, but there's something else, too. You're another man. Men have this territorial thing. You think of the lot as yours. He thinks of it as his." "It'll be his someday if he's not in jail," Harry says. "Will you promise to let me talk to him and you do nothing?" Janice asks. You'll just let him weasel out. But in fact, he has no desire to confront Nelson himself. Janice knows this. She says, "No, I won't. I promise." Strange phone calls have been coming through. Grainy voices with that rich timbre peculiar to black males ask if Nelson Angstrom is there. Harry or Janice responds that Nelson does not live here, that this is the home of his parents. "Well, I ain't had no luck at the number he give me for a home number, and at this place he works, this here secretary always say he's out. Would you like to leave a message?" A pause. "You just tell him Julius called." Or Luther. Or the caller would hang up without leaving a name. Or would have a thin, faintly foreign, precise way of speaking, and once wanted to speak not to Nelson but with Harry. "I am most regretful to bother you, sir, but this son you have leaves me no recourse, but to inform you in person." "To inform me of what?" Harry asks. "To inform you that your son has incurred serious debts, and gentlemen to which I am associated, against any advice which I give them, talk of doing physical harm." Harry asks, shedding water, "How did Nelson incur these debts?" The voice likes getting his own words back. "He incurred them, sir, in pursuit of his satisfactions, and that is within his privileges. But he, or someone on his behalf, must pay. My associates have been assured that you are a very excellent father." "My son," Harry tells him, "is an adult and his finances have nothing to do with me." But the caller has hung up, leaving Harry with the sensation that the walls of his solid little limestone house are as thin as diet crackers, that the wall-to-wall carpet under his feet is soaked with water, that a pipe is burst and there is no plumber to call. The phone is ringing like thrilling cold water poured implacably into the mossy warm crevices of Harry's dream. The phone is on Janice's side. He gropes for it across her stubbornly sleeping body and, with a throat dry from mouth-breathing, croaks, "Hello?" A tremulous young woman's voice says, "Harry, it's Prue. Forgive me for waking you up, but I'm desperate. Nelson has gone crazy. He's already hit me, and I'm afraid he'll start in on the children." "Really?" he says stupidly. "Who on earth is it?" Janice asks irritably, yanked from her own dreams. Prue is sobbing on the end of the line. "Can't stand it anymore. It's been such hell for years." Yeah, Harry says, still feeling stupid. "Here's Janice," he says, and passes the hot potato into her fumbling hands, out from under the covers. "Yes?" Janice is saying into the phone, at wide intervals. "Yes? Did he really? We'll be right over. Stay away from him." Janice hangs up and stares at Harry from beneath her skimpy rumpled bangs. My God. Nelson punched Prue in the face and smashed up everything in the bathroom when he couldn't find some cocaine he thought he hid in there that he wanted. "That explains a lot," Harry says. "Coke takes money, doesn't it? I mean, you can go through hundreds. Thousands. Well, it's probably good this is coming to a head, if we all survive it. It gets it out in the open, at least." Prue has been watching for their coming. She pulls the door open as their feet hit the porch, as if there's an electric eye. Judy is with her, in some fuzzy Oshkosh-bagosh pajamas that are too small for her. "Where's Roy?" Harry asks instantly. "Nelson's putting him to bed," Prue says, with a wry downward tug of one side of her mouth, a kind of apology. "You trust him with the kid?" She says, "He's calmed down since I called. I think he shocked himself, hitting me so hard." In the illumination of the front hall, they can see the pink welt along one cheekbone, the lopsided puffiness of her upper lip. "He said, 'You called my parents? I can't believe it.' It was like he was too stunned to be angry." She grimaces and lightly pushes Judy away from her body and tightens the robe around her middle with a shiver. Janice asks, "Shouldn't we go upstairs to Nelson?" Judy likes this idea and leads the way upstairs. The house, which Harry remembers from way back in the days of the Springers, seems rather pathetically furnished, now that he looks, in remnants from the old days. Nelson greets them in the hallway, carrying Roy in his arms. "Oh," he says, seeing his father, "the big cheese is here." "Don't mouth off at me," Harry tells him. "I'd rather be home in bed." He fishes in the side pocket of his chinos to make sure his little vial of nitrostat heart pills is there. Nelson is trying to play it cool. Even in the bright light, his pupils look dilated and shiny black, and there is a tremor to him, a shiver now and then, as if this night, nearly in May, is cold. "Hi, Mom," he says. "Welcome home." "Nelson, this just won't do," Janice says. "Let me take Roy," Prue says in a cool, neutral voice, and she pushes past the elder Angstroms and, without looking her husband in the face, plucks the sleeping child from him. The hall light with its glass shade crowns her head with sheen as she passes under it, into Roy's room. Harry realizes he is still in charge. Little Judy looks up at him brightly, titillated by being awake and a witness to these adult transactions. "We can't just stand here in the hall," he says. "How about the bedroom?" Harry and Janice's old bedroom has become Nelson and Prue's. A different bedspread, but the same creaky bed with the varnish-knobbed headboard that never hit your back quite right when you tried to read. The ceiling light in this room, glass like the hall light, is also burning. Harry asks, "Mind if I switch that off? All these lights on, I'm getting a headache." Nelson says sourly, "You're the big cheese. Help yourself." With the light switched off, Rabbit can see out into the dark gulf of air where the old copper beach used to be. "Prue overreacted," Nelson explains. "I was trying to make a point and she wouldn't hold still. She never listens to me anymore." "Maybe you don't say enough she wants to hear," Harry tells his son. Okay, Nelson says. "I treated myself to a bender tonight, I admit it. It's been a hell of a week over there. California wants to have this nationwide Toyota-thon to go with a TV commercial blitz, and they expect to see 20% increase of new sales to go with the discounts they're offering. They let me know they haven't been liking our figures lately." "Them and who else?" Harry asks. "Did your buddy Lyle tell you I was over there the other day?" "Snooping around last week, yeah, he sure did. You put Elvira into a snit, too, with all your sexist stuff." "I wasn't sexist. I was just surprised to see a woman selling cars and asked her how it was going. What's your big huff for? You boffing her?" "Dad, when are you going to get your mind off boffing? There's more things in the world than who's boffing who." "Tell me about it," Harry says. "Tell me about how the me generation has a bender. You can't keep snorting this stuff every half hour to keep high. Your nose would burn out. Face it, Nellie, you're a mess. You're a mess and you're a menace. You need help." "Mom, get him off me," Nelson says. Janice gets up her courage and says, "Nelson, your father's right. You need some help." "I'm fine," he whines. "I need some sleep is what I need." Harry asks, "And who are these guys keep calling our house at all hours asking for money?" "They think I owe them money," Nelson answers. "Maybe I do. It's temporary, Dad. It'll all work out." Judy, lying diagonally on the bed behind her grandmother and studying them all with upside-down eyes, joins in, observing, "When Grandpa gets mad, his upper lip goes all stiff, just like Daddy's does." Nelson comes out of his fog of self-pity enough to say to her, "Honey, I'm not sure you should be hearing all this." "Let me put her to bed," Janice offers, not moving, though. Harry doesn't want to be left alone with Nelson. He says, "I'll do it. You two keep talking. Hash it out. I've had my say to this jailbait. Come on, Judy." Judy's room is crowded with stuffed toys, teddy bears, giraffes, and Garfields. But Harry feels they are all old toys. Her childhood is wearing out before she is done with it. She crawls without hesitation or stalling into her bed, under a tattered red puff covered with Peanuts characters. Sitting on the edge of the bed, wondering if Judy expects a bedtime story, Harry sighs so abjectly, so wearily, that both are surprised and nervously laugh. She suddenly asks him if everything will be all right. "How do you mean, honey?" "With Mommy and Daddy." "Sure. They love you and Roy, and they love each other." "They say they don't. They fight." "A lot of married people fight," Harry says. She says nothing. Harry leans down and kisses her warm, dry forehead. "Don't you worry about anything, Judy. Grandma and I will take care of your daddy and all of you." "I know," she says after a pause, letting go. "We are each of us like our little blue planet, hung in black space, upheld by nothing but our mutual reassurances, our loving lies." Emerging opposite to the closed door of the old sewing room, Rabbit sneaks down the hall past the half-closed door to the master bedroom and to the room beyond. This room is now Roy's. Its door is ajar. With 3 fingertips on its cool white wood, Harry pushes it open. By the dim light he sees Prue's long body, pathetically asleep on Roy's little bed, next to her son. Janice and Nelson are in the bright hall, looking for him. He tells them in a whisper, "Prue fell asleep on Roy's bed." Nelson says, "That poor bitch. She'd be okay if she'd just get off my case." Janice tells Harry, "Nelson says he feels much more like himself now and we should go home to bed. He's promised to see a counselor." He looks at his son to see what this means. The boy visibly suppresses a smile of collusion over the necessity of placating women. Harry tells Janice, "Don't let him con ya." Her forehead, which her bangs do not cover, creases in impatience. "Harry, it's time to go." On the drive back, he vents his indignation. "What did he say? What about the money?" Janice says, "He's running the lot, and it would be too unmanning to take it from him. I can't run it, and you're going into the hospital for that angio thing. Plasty. Not till the week after next," he says. "We could always put it off." "I know that's what you'd like, but we just can't go on pretending you're fine. It's been nearly 4 months since New Year's, and in Florida they said you should recover enough in 3. As for the money, Nelson did allow as there has to be some financial restructuring." "Restructuring? That's what everybody up the creek talks about. Face it, the kid is utterly gonzo. He cheats, he snivels, he snorts or whatever. He's a lush besides. Over at the lot he hires these gangsters and guys with AIDS. He promised to see a counselor. He admits he might have a problem. I think that's a good night's work," Janice says. Rabbit has always been squeamish about things being put into him. Dental drills, tongue depressors, little long knives to clean out earwax. So the idea of a catheter being inserted at the top of his right leg, just under where the groin crease is, and being pushed along steered with a little flexible tip like some eyeless worm you find wriggling out of an apple where you just bit, is deeply repugnant to him. They keep him in the hospital for 5 nights. Janice visits him Saturday. She is very busy on the outside. The classes she has to take to be a real estate salesman have begun to meet. Also, she has been spending a lot of daytime hours with Prue and the grandchildren. And Charlie Stavros, Rabbit's former associate at the lot, and Janice's old lover, called her up and took her out to lunch. Rabbit protests, "The bastard, he did? I'm not even dead yet." "Of course not, darling," Janice says, "and nobody expects you to be. Charlie's concerned about us, is all. He thinks I shouldn't just be letting things slide, but should get an outside accountant and our lawyer and look at the books over at the lot just like you wanted." "You believe it when Charlie tells you, but not when I do," Harry says. "Honey, you're my husband, and husbands get wives all confused," Janice says. "Well, are you going to do it?" Call in another accountant. "I've done it already," she announces, the proud secret she's been waiting for the conversation to elicit. "Charlie and I went over to the lot, and this Lyle who was so mean to you wasn't there, but I was able to reach him over the phone at his home number. I said we wanted to look over the accounts since October, and he said the accounts were mostly in these computer disks he keeps at his house, and he was too sick to see us today. So I said, Maybe he was too sick to be our accountant then, and I said he should bring in his books and discs tomorrow, or a policeman would be out to get them. You said all that? Harry asks. Maybe not as smoothly as I'm saying it to you, but I got it all out. I don't like what these queers have done to Nelson. They've corrupted him. Gay, Harry says wearily. We call them gays now. And I don't know, in a situation like Nelson's, who corrupts who? Maybe I corrupted the poor kid 20 years ago. Oh, Harry, don't be so hard on yourself. It's depressing to see you like this. What have they done to you, these doctors? He's glad she asked. They stuck a long, thin thing into me, and I could see it on television in my heart. Right on the screen, my own poor heart, while it was pumping to keep me alive. They shouldn't be allowed to go into your heart like that. They should just let you die. Darling, what a stupid way to talk. It's modern science. You should be grateful. You're going to be fine. As he lies there day after day, Harry thinks fondly of those dead bricklayers who bothered to vary their rows at the top of the 3 buildings across the street with such festive patterns of recess and protrusion, diagonal and upright, casting shadows in different ways at different times of the day, these men of another century up on their scaffold, talking Pennsylvania Dutch among themselves, or were Italians doing all the masonry, even then. Thinking of all the bricks that have been piled up and knocked down and piled up again on the snug square streets that lift toward Mount Judge, Harry tries to view his life as a brick of sorts, set in place with a slap in 1933 and hardening ever since. Just one life in rows and walls and blocks of lives. On his final night, Janice comes in while he is eating his last bland supper. Her eyes seem to be wearing contact lenses of an unnatural glitter until he realizes those are tears. "Oh, Harry," she begins, "it's worse than we thought. Thousands and thousands." "Thousands of what?" "Of dollars Nelson stole. Charlie and I and this accountant his nephew knows, Mildred says she was too old for doing an audit, went over there today, and I asked to see the books. Nelson was there for once, and he looked at me in this heartbreaking, hopeless way I'll never forget as long as I live, and said, 'Sure, Mom, what did I want to know?' He told us everything. At first, when he needed money so desperately for the cocaine, he would just write himself a check marked expenses or operating cash. These little amounts, 100 or even 2 at a time, weren't really enough to keep him going, so he got the idea of offering people a discount on the used cars if they paid in cash or with a check written directly out to him. I told you there weren't enough used sales on the statements, Harry says, in a triumph that feels rather flat. Oh, but Harry, he didn't even stop with that. He was doing crack by this time, and the amount of money he needed was incredible. He and Lyle worked out this scheme. Here it gets very technical. I'm not sure I understand it entirely. There's this Toyota Motors Credit Corporation in California that finances our inventory direct with Mid-Atlantic and gets paid when we sell a car and adds to our credit account when we order one for the lot. What Nelson was doing, each month he'd report 1 or 2 sales fewer than there actually were, and so Toyota would roll over the indebtedness on these cars while he and Lyle put the proceeds in a separate account they'd opened in the company name. So every month we'd owe this TMCC for 1 or 2 more cars than were actually on the lot, and our debt to them kept getting bigger, and our actual inventory was getting smaller. How much do we actually owe them? Harry asks. Nobody knows, Harry. Nelson doesn't exactly remember, and Lyle says a lot of the discs he was keeping the accounts on have been accidentally erased. Accidentally on purpose, he says. So what's going to happen? Janice lifts her tear-smeared face and, surprisingly, has some answers. Well, once we found out how much we owe TMCC, we'll have to settle up. And Nelson's agreed to enter a rehab place. Immediately. What made him agree? I said it was either that or I'd fire him from the lot and prosecute. Wow, you said that? I did, Harry. I made myself. Where is this rehab place? In North Philadelphia. The complete program is 90 days. Will I have to see the kid before he goes? Harry asks. No, baby. He's going tomorrow morning before we bring you home. He'll be gone all summer. Who'll run the lot? Janice puts her hand over his, a gesture that feels to him learned, coached. You will, Harry, she says. Janice and Prue agree that rather than risk leaving Harry alone in the Penn Park house while Janice does her 3 hours at the Penn State Extension, she will bring him back to Mount Judge for his first night out of the hospital. As she drives into Brewer, she looks forward to seeing him on his feet again. But he disappoints her. His 5 days in St. Joseph's have left him self-obsessed and lackadaisical. He seems brittle and puffy, suddenly. His russet slacks and blue cotton sports coat look loose on him. The hospital diet has squeezed pounds of water out of his system. Drained of spirit as well, he seems halting and blinky, the way her father became in his last 5 years. In the car, Janice says, I can't stop thinking about Nelson. Harry has slumped down in the passenger seat. What's to think, he asks. Did he wriggle out of going? I thought he'd run. He didn't run at all. That was one of the things that made it so sad. He went off just the way he used to go to school. Harry, I wonder if we're doing the right thing. What else can we do? He asks indolently. What does Prue think? Oh, she's for it. It gets him off her hands. You can see in her mind she's single already, all independent and brisk and a little rude to me, I thought. Don't get touchy, Harry says. Hey, where are we going? This is the way to Mount Judge. She says, Harry, now don't get mad, but you know I have to go to class, and I'd feel too funny leaving you alone just out of the hospital. So Prue and I worked it out that you and I would sleep tonight in Mother's old bed. Why can't I go to my own fucking home? I was looking forward to it. I lived in that damn barn of your mother's for 15 years, and that was enough. Just for one night, honey, please. Otherwise I'll be sick with worry and flunk my quiz. He sinks back into his seat, giving up. What about my pajamas? What about my toothbrush? They're there. I brought them over this morning. I tell you, this day, I've really had to plan. When they arrive at the house, no one is there. Janice leads Rabbit upstairs. Ma's old bed has been freshly made up. His off-white pajamas are folded nicely on his pillow. I'll be back at 10:30, maybe 11 if we decide to go out for beers afterwards, Janice says. You go to bed and rest. You look tired, honey. He lies down on Ma Springer's bed, on top of the covers but under the Amish quilt, a patchwork quilt that releases to his nostrils a memory of how Ma smelled toward the end. He must have fallen asleep, for when he opens his eyes it is dark. Rain coming closer. From the sounds downstairs, Prue and both children are home. His head is up on 2 pillows, so the full feeling in his chest is eased. His heart is giving him no pain, just floats wounded on the mottled sea of ebbing time. Time passes. He doesn't know how much before the door handle turns and clicks, and a slant rod of hall light stabs into the amniotic isolation of the little borrowed room. Prue's head pokes in. You awake? She asks in almost a whisper. Yep, Rabbit says. Just lying here. You get the kids settled? Finally, the young woman says, and with the exasperated emphasis enters the room wholly, standing erect. She is wearing that shorty bathrobe of hers, her legs cased in a white shadow descending to her ankles. Mind if I smoke? Not at all. How come you haven't given it up with all this health kick? I had, Prue says. But now, this thing with Nelson, why not? What does anything matter? Her hovering face shows one profile, then the other. There's no place to sit in here. This is an awful room. "It's cozy," he says, and moves his legs so she can sit on the bed. "I bet you were asleep," Prue says. "I'll only stay for this cigarette. I just need a little adult company. I hope putting the kids down with Nelson gone isn't such a nightmare every night. They need so much reassurance. I thought he wasn't here a lot of nights." This time of night he usually was. With the kids, he was helpful. However much of a shit he was to everybody else, he wasn't a bad father. He asks her, "What time is it, anyway?" 9:15 or so. Janice would get back at 10:30 at the earliest. There was plenty of time to see this through. He relaxes back into his pillows. "He was a shit to you?" "Absolutely. Terrible." Her voice is hoarsening and finding a certain swing, a welling up. "I have no use for him anymore. I'm scared to fuck him. I'm scared to be legally associated with him. I've wasted my life. You don't know what it's like. You're a man. You're free. You can do what you want in life. Until you're 60 at least, you're a buyer. A woman's a seller. She has to be. And she better not haggle too long. I'm 34. I've had my shot, Harry. I'm scared. So scared. And my kids are scared, too. I'm trash, and they're trash, and they know it." Hey, he has to say. "Come on. Nobody's trash." Her sobbing is shaking the bed so badly that in his delicate post-op state he feels queasy. To quiet her big body, he reaches out and pulls her toward him. As if expecting his touch, she huddles tightly, though a blanket and a sheet are between them, and continues sobbing in a bitter lower register, her breath hot on his chest, where a pajama button has come undone. "You're scared," he says. "You're still young. At least you're healthy. Think of how scared I feel." Prue seems to him to be unnaturally still, like a rabbit huddled in oncoming headlights. He lets the hand of the arm around her broad back move up across the bumps of her quilted robe and enter the silken cave at the nape of her neck to toy with the warm hair there. She tells him, "You were one of the things I liked about Nelson. Maybe I thought Nelson would grow into somebody like you. Maybe he did. You don't get to see what a bastard I can be." "I can imagine," she says, "but people provoke you." He goes on, "I see a lot of myself in the kid." The nape of her neck tingles under his fingers, the soft hairs rising to his electricity. Not waiting too long to think about it, he with his free hand lifts hers from his chest and places it lower, where an erection has surprisingly sprouted from his half-shaved groin. His gesture has the pre-sexual quality of one child sharing with another an interesting discovery. Her eyes widen in the dim face inches from his on the pillow. He lets his face drift on the tide of blood risen within him across those inches to set their mouths together, carefully testing for the angle, while her fingers caress him in a rhythm slower than that of his thudding heart. Rain whips at the screen. A leak onto the windowsill accelerates its tapping. A brilliant close flash shocks the air everywhere, and less than a second later, a heart-stopping crack and splintering of thunder crushes the house from above. As if in overflow of this natural heedlessness, Prue says, "Shit," jumps from the bed, slams shut the window, pulls down the shade, tears open her bathrobe and sheds it, and, reaching down, pulls her nightie up over her head. Her tall, pale, wide-hipped nakedness in the dim room is lovely, just as those pear trees in blossom along that block and brewer last month were lovely. All his, it had seemed. A piece of paradise blundered upon. Incredible. By mid-June, the weeds have taken over. Burdock and chicory stand 3 feet tall along the stony, dry shoulders of Route 111. and the struggling little yew hedge meant to dress up the base of the Springer Motors display window has crabgrass and purslane spreading through the rotting bark mulch, which hasn't been renewed for a couple of years. Not for the first time since returning to the lot does Harry feel he is not really there, but is a ghost. In Nelson's old office, the accountant Janice has hired on Charlie's advice is going through the books, a task so extensive he has brought a full-time assistant. These two youngish men feel like the real management of the firm. Harry wanders into the office where they are nesting, day after day, in piles of paper. The one in charge has a rubbery, tired face with dark rings under his eyes, and the assistant seems to be a kind of moron, a simpleton at speaking anyway, with not enough back to his head. "Ah," the one in charge says, "just the guy we need. Does the name Angus Barfield mean anything to you?" "No," Harry says. And yet, wait, there's a faint bell, Barfield. He has heard the name Angus before, from Nelson's lips. "A good guy for you to know," the accountant says. "From December to April, he was buying a Toyota a month. Totals up to just under $75K. All in the same name and the same address on Willow Street." "Where's Willow?" Harry asks. "That's one of the side streets up above Locust, you know." "Locust," Harry repeats, struggling to recall. "Single white male. Excellent credit ratings. The only trouble with him as a customer," the accountant says, "is according to city records, he's been dead for 6 months." "I got it," Harry says. "That's Slim. Angus Barfield was the real name of a guy everybody called Slim. He was a gay, I guess, about my son's age. Had a good job in downtown Brewer." The accountant dramatically slaps the tidy chaos of papers spread out on the desk. December to April, Brewer Trust extended 5 car loans to this Angus Barfield, made over to Springer Motors. "How could they to the same guy? Common sense," Harry begins. "Since computers, my friend, common sense has gone out the window. The auto loan department of a bank is just a tiddlywinks. The computer checked his credit and liked it, and the loan was approved. The checks were cashed but never showed up in the company credits. We think your pal Lyle opened a dummy somewhere. Between these loans from Brewer Trust and the diddled inventory with Mid-Atlantic Toyota, some 200 grand was skimmed from this operation that we can verify so far." Rabbit, hearing the sum, goes cold with the premonition that this debt will swallow him. Here amid all these papers arrayed on the desk where he himself used to work, a fatal hole is being hatched. He taps his jacket for the reassuring lump of the nitrostat bottle. He'll take one as soon as he gets away. The night he and Prue fucked, both of them weary and half-crazy with their fates, the old bed creaking beneath them had seemed another kind of nest, an interwoven residue of family fortunes, Ma Springer's musty old lady scent released from the mattress by this sudden bouncing where for years she had slept alone, an essence of old mothballed blankets stored in attic cedar chests, an essence arising not only from the abused bed, but from the old sewing apparatus stored here, and Fred's forgotten neckties in the closet, and the dust balls beneath the venerable four-poster. All those family traces descended to this coupling by thunder and lightning. It was now as if it had never been. He and Prue are severely polite with each other, and Janice, evermore the working girl, has ceased to create many occasions when the households mingle. Harry laughs. "Poor Slim," he says. "Some pal Lyle turned out to be, buying him all those wheels he didn't need." "I love what you do for me, Toyota," the banner in the display window reads. At times, standing at the window when a cloud dense with moisture darkens the atmosphere, or an occluding truck pulls up past the yew hedge for some business at the service doors, Harry catches a sudden reflection of himself and is startled by how big he is, by how much space he is taking up on the planet. He needs a good self-image today, for the lot is going to be visited at 11 by a representative of the Toyota Corporation, a Mr. Natsumi Shimada. Word of the financial irregularities anatomized by the two accountants Janice hired under Charlie's direction has filtered upward, higher and higher. "Nervous?" Elvira asks, sidling up beside him in a slim seersucker suit. "Not too," he answers. "It's really Nelson and Lyle should be facing Mr. Shimada," she says. Harry shrugs. "What can you do? The lawyer got Lyle on the phone and the guy just laughed at him. Said he was taking oxygen just to get out of bed and go to the toilet and could die at any time. Furthermore, he said the disease had spread to his brain and he had no idea what the lawyer was talking about." She asks at his side, "Won't Nelson be home in a week or so?" "That's the schedule," Harry says. Mr. Shimada arrives in a hired limousine. He is an impeccable, compact man of about 5'6", carrying an amazingly thin, oxblood red briefcase. "Is very nice meeting you," he says. "Area most nice." He speaks English easily, but with enough of an accent to cost Harry a second's response time answering him. "Well, not around here exactly," he answers, instantly thinking that this is tactless, for why would Toyota want to locate its franchise in an ugly area? I mean, the farm country is what we're famous for, barns with hex signs and all that. He wonders if he should explain hex sign and decides it's not worth it. "Want to come into my office and sit?" "With pleasure," Mr. Shimada says. Rather unceremoniously, he enters Harry's office and sits on the vinyl customer's chair with padded chrome arms facing the desk. He smiles to himself and opens, with a double snap as startling as a gunshot, his briefcase. From it he takes a single sheet of stiff, creamy paper, sparsely decorated with typed figures. "According to figures here, between November 88 and May 89, Springer Motors failed to report sale of 9 Toyota vehicles, totaling $137,400 at factory price. This sum, accumulating interest, come to, as of this date, $145,800. He hands the paper across the desk. Harry covers it with his big hand and says, "Yeah, well, but its accountants we hired reported all this to you. My wife and I, technically she's the owner here, we have every intention of paying Mid-Atlantic Toyota back every penny we owe." Mr. Shimada leans back a bit. "How soon?" he asks. Harry takes a plunge. "End of August." Mr. Shimada blinks and seems to nod in concord. "End of August." He snaps shut his briefcase and balances it on its edge beside his chair. He gazes obliquely at the framed photographs on Harry's desk. His less upright posture in the chair indicates a new, less formal level of discourse. "Young people now, most interesting," he decides to say. "Not scared of starving as through most human history, but scared of something, not happy. Living now 5 years in California, it disappoints me the lack of discipline in people of America. Toyota agency must be a place of discipline, a place of order." Harry feels he must interrupt. He doesn't like the trend of this monologue. "We think this agency is. Sales have been up 8% this summer, bucking the national trend. I'm always saying to people, Toyota's been good to us, and we've been good to Toyota." "No more. Sorry," Mr. Shimada says simply. He leans forward and, with a flash of wide white cuff, taps the page of figures on Harry's desk. "Too much disorder. Pay by end of August. No prosecution for criminal activities. But no more Toyota franchise at Singer Motors." He picks up his slim briefcase and stands. "You keep invoice. Many more papers to arrive. Perhaps you would be kind to discuss with Rimo driver best way to find Route 422. Harry accompanies his visitor outdoors to the limousine, whose black driver is leaning against the fender, eating a slice of pizza. and a cloud pulls back from the sun. A colorless, merciless dog-day brilliance makes him wince. He cannot imagine the lot without the tall blue Toyota sign. Poor Janice, she'll be knocked for a loop. She'll feel she's let her father down. But she doesn't react too strongly. She is more interested these days in her real estate courses. Janice has completed one pair of 10-week courses and is into another. I'm sure Nelson has some plan. And if he doesn't, we'll all sit down and negotiate one, she says. Negotiate? 200,000 disappearing dollars? And you don't have Toyotas to sell anymore. Why can't we get an American franchise? Isn't Detroit making a big comeback? Not so big they can afford Nelson Angstrom, he says. Harry, she says, you are taking it hard. Don't. Daddy used to say, for every up there's a down, and for every down there's an up. What kind of plans can Nelson have? Harry asks. He'll be lucky to stay out of jail. You can't go to jail for stealing from your own family, Janice says. It's you I worry about more than Nelson. Is the angina coming back? The breathlessness? A twinge now and then, he admits. It's just something I'm going to have to live with.